Louis, what's going on? Why do you want a divorce?
Look, Jenny, it's not working out.
What do you mean it's not working out? We have been married for years.
Yeah, and it's been years of dealing with your family problems. I can't take it anymore.
What are you talking about? What problems?
Your father's hospital bills, for one. We're going to be drowning in debt because of it.
My father needs medical care, Louis. What was I supposed to do? Let him suffer?
I don't care about your father. I care about us. And this debt is ruining our lives.
That's not fair, Louis. We are in this together. We'll figure it out.
No, Jenny, I'm done. And there's something else I need to tell you. I've been seeing someone else.
What? How could you do this to me?
It's not about you, Jenny. I needed someone who actually cares about me, not just their own family problems.
You are a terrible person, Louis. How could you be so selfish? We were supposed to be supporting each other. I have never even made you do anything for my father.
Well, that's not enough. You're the one being selfish.
Hi, my name is Jenny and I'm in my 40s. I have been married to my husband Louis for almost a decade now. When we first got together, Louis told me that he wanted to build a life with me. We talked about having kids and starting a family, and I was excited about the prospect. But as the years went by, Louis always seemed to find reasons why we shouldn't have kids. At first, I was understanding and patient. I thought that Louis just needed time to come around to the idea of having kids. But as the years passed, I began to feel more and more frustrated and resentful. I had always wanted to be a mother, and it felt like Louis was depriving me of that opportunity. Finally, I decided to confront Louis about his reluctance to have kids. I was tired of feeling like I was missing out on something that was so important to me. That's when Louis dropped a bombshell on me. He told me that he didn't want kids because he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to take care of them properly. He blamed my father for that. He's often unwell and lived close by, so we could take care of him. Louis said that a baby would put a lot of pressure on us, and taking care of my father had already been a lot. I was shocked and hurt by Louis's words. I couldn't believe that he would use my father's illness as an excuse not to have kids. I loved my dad, and I was happy to take care of him. And I had never asked Louis to support my dad financially or do anything more than just call a handyman for him once in a while. I found Louis's excuses really lame. We had had many fights regarding this problem. At the same time, my father's health started to deteriorate. He had always been a brilliant engineer. But ever since he fell ill, he retired to his home and spent most of his time writing. I didn't know what he was writing about, but he seemed to be working on it day and night. As his condition worsened, I spent more and more time taking care of him. It was exhausting, but I loved my father and I was happy to do it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something strange about his occupation. It was like he was keeping a secret, but I could never figure out what it was. One day, in the middle of the night, my father called me and asked to be taken to the ER. I rushed to his house and brought him to the hospital. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. We spent the next few hours there, making sure that all the needed tests were done. It was heartbreaking to remember how easily I could have lost him like that, but it also made me realize how much I loved him and how much I wanted to be a mother. I knew that I would do anything to take care of my child, just like I was doing for my father. Then I thought of Louis. I left him home and didn't even bother to wake him up because I thought he needed sleep. Plus, he had always been so grumpy whenever I asked him to help with anything related to my father anyway. As I was waiting at the hospital for them to check up on my father, I realized that I had mistakenly grabbed Louis's phone instead of my own because they had very similar models. I didn't have much to do, so I decided to use his phone to pass the time. I started scrolling through his messages and saw that he had been texting one of his friends from work. They were talking about a project they were working on, but then I saw something that caught my eye. Louis had been complaining to his friend about how much of a burden my father felt to him. He had been saying that it wasn't his responsibility and that I should be taking care of him on my own. I felt hurt and angry. I couldn't believe that he had been talking about me like that behind my back. I wanted to confront him, but I knew that it wouldn't do any good. He would just get defensive and make excuses. Just when I thought I couldn't get any worse, a notification popped up on the screen. It was a very strange message from an unknown person. The message seemed really suspicious. It read, "What are you doing?" As if they know who my husband was and was used to talking to him in the middle of the night. I was petrified. What could this text mean? Is it that he's cheating on me? I was clouded by negative thoughts, but my father needed me. I decided to ignore it and focus on my father. Luckily, there were no serious problems with my father. However, his hospital fees were quite high, and I took him home with a restless mind. I knew that I had to figure out a way to pay for everything, but I didn't want to burden Louis with it. He had enough on his plate with work and his own responsibilities. When I got home, Louis was still sleeping. I gently got on the bed so I didn't wake him up. I also left his phone back where I found it. I lay there for a while, listening to his breathing. I felt such a huge wall between us with the messages that I had seen that day. Even if he really wasn't cheating on me, and this was all just a big misunderstanding, I couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't truly understand what I was going through. The next day, Louis complained to me about a strange number that kept texting him romantically. He thought it might have been a mistake. He showed me the text, and they were from the same person that I saw on his phone the day before. There was one message in the morning that read, "How did you sleep?" And then I watched as Louis deleted them both from his phone. I could see that he was genuinely confused and uncomfortable with the situation. I breathed a sigh of relief and told him that it was probably just a wrong number. We laughed it off and went about our day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off between us. As the week went on, I found myself becoming more and more distant from Louis. I kept feeling like he was hiding something from me, even though I knew that he wasn't cheating. But I had bigger problems to be concerned with: my father's medical bills. I asked Louis if he could help with it, despite feeling terrible about it. I told Louis how I only needed his help for a while before I could sort it out myself, and he said that he wanted to look into the finances of the family. I felt a sense of relief knowing that Louis was taking an active interest in our finances, and I trusted him to make the right decision for us. But at the same time, I felt like I was being too lenient. He was my husband. yet I felt the need to beg for his help. I knew something was seriously wrong with our relationship, but since I had so much on my plate already, it was difficult for me to process anything. However, just a week later, things took a turn for the worse. While I was at work, a lawyer called me up. My hands started to shake as the lawyer said that my husband had filed for divorce and moved out of the house that morning. It felt like my world had crumbled beneath me. I couldn't believe that Lewis had done this. I thought that we had a good life together. Even when we had disagreements, I had never have thought of divorce, but apparently he had been feeling differently for a while. I was shocked and called my husband, thinking it was all just a terrible mistake. He picked up the phone and answered with the coldest tone I had ever heard from him. "Lewis, what's going on? Why do you want a divorce?"
Look, Jenny, it's not working out.
"What do you mean it's not working out? We had been married for years."
Yeah, and it's been years of dealing with your family's problems. I can't take it anymore.
"What are you talking about? What problems?"
Your father's hospital bills, for one. We're going to be drowning in debt because of it.
"My father needed medical care, Lewis. What was I supposed to do? Let him suffer?"
I don't care about your father. I care about us, and this debt is ruining our lives.
"That's not fair, Lewis. We are in this together. We'll figure it out."
No, Jenny, I'm done. And there's something else I need to tell you. I've been seeing someone else.
"What? How could you do this to me?"
It's not about you, Jenny. I needed someone who actually cares about me, not just their own family problems.
"You're a terrible person, Lewis. How could you be so selfish? We were supposed to be supporting each other. I have never even made you do anything for my father."
Well, that's not enough. You're the one being selfish.
Then he hung up on me. I went home that day feeling numb. When I opened the door, I was still hoping that maybe Lewis had changed his mind and would be there waiting for me. But instead, I found that all of his belongings had already been moved out. It was like he had never even lived here. I started to panic once again, wondering where he had gone and why he could have left me for another woman. I tried to call him again, hoping that he would think differently this time, but instead, a woman answered the phone.
Hello?
"Who is this?"
This is Sarah? Who is this?
"This is Louisa's wife. Where is he?"
What's going on? I'm sorry, but Luis doesn't want to talk to you. He's moved on with his life.
Moved on? What are you talking about?
He's with me now, and he wanted me to tell you that he's done with everything. He just can't be with you anymore. You were too much of a burden for him.
I felt like I had been punched in the gut. To hear someone say something so hurtful and cruel was almost more than I could bear. A burden? What do you mean by that?
You know what I mean. You were always asking for help with your father's medical bills and your own expenses. You never contributed anything to their relationship. Lewis was tired of carrying you on his back all the time.
That's not true. I supported him in everything he does.
Well, he is much happier with me now. I'm not going to be a drain on his finances like you were. You should just move on with your life and forget about him. Stop calling us.
With that, Sarah hung up the phone, leaving me feeling more hurt and confused than ever. It was like everything I thought I knew about my marriage had been a lie. It was a tough time for me, but I knew I had to be strong for my dad. I went through with the divorce, and cut all contact with Luis. I tried to focus on my job and worked hard to afford my dad's medical bills. It was exhausting, but I knew I had to do it for him. I didn't have time to grieve for my marriage or for the life that I thought I had. All my energy went into taking care of my dad. Despite all of my effort, it was time for my dad to go. 2 months later, my father passed away. It was devastating. I had lost the most important person in my life. I felt like my world had come crashing down on me. I was alone and had no one to turn to. But I knew that I had to keep going. I had to be strong for myself. I took some time off from work to grieve and to sort things out. I realized that life was too short to waste on people who didn't value me. That was when something incredible happened. It wasn't until I was going through my father's belongings after his passing that I discovered something that shocked me. In his will, I found out that my father was actually an engineer working on a government project. That's why he never talked about his jobs or his colleagues. It all made sense now. He had to keep his work a secret from everyone, including his family. I couldn't believe that my father had such an important role in the government. It was like he was a completely different person to me now. As I was going through his documents, I noticed that there was no information about his insurance plan. I was initially worried about how I would pay for his medical bills and other expenses that may arise. But if he couldn't reveal the identity of his employer, that meant his insurance details were probably classified information too. I didn't know what to do. I felt so overwhelmed. I decided to seek help from a lawyer who specializes in these kinds of cases. He was able to navigate the complex legalities and find a way for me to access my father's insurance plan. To my surprise, my father had left me a large sum of money from his insurance plan along with his properties as my inheritance. The total amount was close to 1.2 million. I couldn't believe it. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. I was grateful for the financial security, but it was bittersweet. I wish my father were still alive and that we could have been able to enjoy this together. Despite the loss of my father, I knew that he would want me to use the money to start a new life. It was time to move on from the past and create a new future for myself. With the inheritance, I was able to buy a new house in a different city, one that I had always dreamed of living in. I used some of the money to pay off any debts that I had and invested the rest into a business venture that I had been considering. Most importantly, I used the money to start an adoption application. One of my biggest dreams was still becoming a mom. I was determined to start afresh and leave my past behind. However, a few months into my new life, Louis suddenly reappeared. He came to my house begging for my forgiveness. He claimed that he realized his mistake and that he wanted to make things right. He even bought flowers and gifts, trying to win me over. I later found out that Louis had dumped the other woman as soon as he realized how wealthy I had become. I immediately kicked him out of my house and called the cops on him. I didn't want anything to do with him anymore. And with that, I moved on with my life, living comfortably and happily as deserved. I can't wait for what the future holds and for my own little family.